Testing. Okay, I sound good, I think. Boom. Bam. This is leftover from last time. Hello. Hi, everybody. Anyone who's listening and watching. We're gonna do another Bleach random versus battle live stream. So we're gonna aim to do 5 as our usual. I don't know if we'll do 5, but I will try and not talk too long about one fight. But often when I'm talking about a fight, I get to understand what I actually think, because we have, was it 232 combatants on our spin the wheel thing, even though it doesn't feel like it. It feels like maybe we have 50 because we keep getting the same guys, but I'm not thought of every combination, so sometimes I do need to rant for a little bit, or just like chatter for a little bit to figure out my feelings on it. Because sometimes I'm like, oh, I think this guy's probably going to win, but let's talk about it, and I end up thinking it's a stalemate, or concluding that one guy is definitely going to win, and maybe not the one that I thought. So, let's bring up our wheel, and let's just jump straight into it. Okay, so combatant number 1, and we did a lot of respinning last live stream. So what happens is we get one combatant, and then we're going to spin for a second one. If it's a stupid combination, we'll respin 3 times. So this is Ichigo DANGAI. That's very powerful. That's the form that he fights Aizen in, the one that has access to Mugetsu. So we need to get a strong person here for the second combatant. If not, we'll respin a few times, and if we get no one, we'll respin. Okay. So basically we see Ichigo versus Aizen. This is Deicide Limit, so this is just before he goes into the cocoon. So yeah, Dangai Ichigo would destroy this Aizen, although he does still have the Hokyoku. But I don't know if that's interesting enough. Let's spin again. That's too similar to a fight we've already seen, so I'm just going to spin again. It's basically just like, what if Ichigo fought him a few chapters earlier? Nell Baby, that's versus Dangai Ichigo. We're not doing that one. And final spin, Ulquiorra. Oh my goodness. Yeah, okay, let's talk about this, because I've heard a lot of very conflicting things in the past. So I'm actually kind of excited to talk about this. To some people, this might be like a, well, obviously this guy's gonna win, but I've actually heard some debate about this, so let's talk about it. Ichigo. Let's get a stronger orange for Ichigo here. Ulquiorra. Let's give Ulquiorra that classic kind of turquoise he has, although that doesn't show up well at all. Let's give him a deep. There we go. Alright, Dangai Ichigo versus Ulquiorra. Now we see, obviously, one of the best fights in the whole series. We see, I'm just going to test my sound here. Okay, I'm good. One of the best fights in the series is Ichigo versus Ulquiorra. Let's just kind of quickly go through that, because obviously this is what we're going to base it off, where we're going to see Ichigo versus Ulquiorra, and then also talk about Dangai Ichigo. So let's begin. So Ichigo versus Ulquiorra, the final fight, which was only the second Yeah, the second fight, I believe. After Ichigo's victory with Grimmjow and being healed after his little trial with Tesla and Noitora, he is feeling good. He's basically had his whole thing about his hollow mask, and he's comfortable in his hollow mask. He fought Grimmjow with it, and he fought Grimmjow fairly equally, although I feel like in the anime it sort of appears like Ichigo is on the back foot, but it is because he's struggling, and then when he realizes, like, you know, he remembers what he's fighting for and stuff, he manages to take out Grimmjow pretty easy. And one of my least favorite bits about that fight, I used to not like that bit where he's like, sorry, I can't lose anymore, so I'm killing you. I get it now. I understand it with all the themes, but I still don't like when Grimmjow uses his ultimate technique and he just gets completely destroyed by Ichigo. Like, it doesn't do anything. It's like giant claw things. I kind of like the bit where he's like, oh, I'm not just here for Orihime, but I'm here for everyone, and I'm here to defeat Aizen, and I'm here to save everyone. I like that, although it goes on a little bit too long in the anime, but I'm getting very off topic right now. Yeah, Ichigo manages to defeat Grimmjow, and he is probably stronger than Grimmjow in his resurrection. They play evenly, but Ichigo's struggling with using his hollow powers in front of somebody who he cares about, and like going to, you know, deeply or darkly down that path of accepting his hollow powers or whatever. But I would say, even though Ichigo struggles a bit more with Grimmjow, he is stronger. Like, he tanks Grimmjow's like massive blast missiles that come from his elbow. And he tanks like 6 of those, and if we think about it, it blew up one of those red pillars, with just one of them, 6 of them. What would that equate to, like, Ulquiorra? Like, when we see pretty much the same Ichigo fighting Ulquiorra, he blocks, in his hollow mask, he blocks a regular Sero from Ulquiorra. Easy, not even a scratch on him. And the fact that he also tanks sort of those 6 missiles, which I would say probably has the destructive power of Sero each, that's pretty impressive. Although, when we see masked Ichigo fight Ulquiorra's first resurrection, he gets completely destroyed, not completely destroyed, but very destroyed by the Sero Oscuras. Even though he bats away the Gran Rey Sero. The Gran Rey Sero and Sero Oscuras are a little bit weird, because they're supposed to be like, yes, the release form, or like some sort of Esparta or Resurrection exclusive in some way. We don't exactly know how or which way, but both like exclusive high-ranking Esparta sort of types of Sero. But Ichigo bats away Grimmjow's Grand Sero very easily, yet he gets blown away by Sero Oscuras. So it's a little bit weird there, but Ichigo seems to have some decent durability, even if the mask itself doesn't. Yeah. But, so, when we get to Ichigo with the mask, as far as he gets with Ulquiorra is the second release. Like, it's weird, because even though it's so cool to see him, like, completely be unfazed by base form Ulquiorra still kind of outspeeds him, or is equal to speed with Ichigo, but Ichigo is way tankier and can, like, cut into base Ulquiorra. And I feel like we get that moment like, oh yeah, they're kind of fighting evenly, even though Ichigo's kind of on the back foot, but now he can let it all loose and use his hollow mask. And although Ulquiorra runs away and flees, tries a Sero and it doesn't work, so he goes above the dome to release his resurrection. I think that's a very intelligent play, because I think Ulquiorra could have kept fighting Ichigo in his hollow form, in his base form against Ichigo's hollow mask, but it wouldn't have been very fruitful. It wouldn't have led to anything, really. It just would have wasted his energy. But I don't think, like, Ulquiorra was, like, gonna get blitzed, or he was gonna just get killed by Ichigo unless he went into resurrection. I think they could have extended the fight, but he decides, no, I'm gonna go straight into resurrection. And Ichigo can't outspeed him, which is interesting. So I don't think Masked Ichigo is too much stronger than base form Ulquiorra. Maybe only twice as strong, or 50% is stronger. But yeah, when he gets that boost into Resurrection, which I'm not gonna like try and power scale, but obviously he gets several times, stronger. He gets way faster. He has the Lanza, not the Rempago that's in his segunda etapa, but in his first base Resurrection, he still has the lance that he throws 2 at Ichigo before Ichigo really realizes. He just dodges the first one by focusing, and by the time he's dodged the first one, the second one is coming in. And Ulquiorra even notes that if Ichigo isn't releasing Getsuga and putting on his mask and like basically doing everything to counteract his attacks because he can't outspeed him, his head would be rolling on the ground. And so Ichigo is like barely keeping up with Segunda, with Resurrection Ulquiorra, and it's just he's barely keeping up essentially, and Segunda Etapa was just overkill. Now we get to when Ichigo goes hollow. He gets killed and he goes Vasto Lorde, as we call it, and completely, I don't even know what the word merc means, but people use it in this context. But yeah, Ichigo destroys Ulquiorra. Like, he overpowers Ulquiorra's Cero Oscuras with a regular Cero. Not like he has like a special technique like Cero Oscuras. He just has a stronger regular Cero than Cero Oscuras, which, unless it's just because of the power, obviously depending on how much power you can put into these attacks, like changes how powerful it is. But still, a certain technique refines somebody's strength into like an attack. So even though Ulquiorra is stronger than Grimmjow, I still think Acero Oscuras is more potent, or at least more devastating than a Gran Rey Cero, because that was pretty much just swatted aside by Masked Ichigo. While Masked Ichigo almost almost died getting hit by Cero Oscuras if he didn't use Getsuga. But when we get to Vasto Lorde Ichigo, he just overpowers an Oscuras with a base Cero. He's kind of outspeeding. He slips past his Pesquisa. He dodges the Lanza. Even though he does block it with his hand. So Vasto Lorde Ichigo does block the Lanza with his hand, and he's like, Ulquiorra's like, impossible. But do keep in mind, when an attack isn't fully complete, it's not as strong. Like when Ichigo is powering up his Cero, which we saw can blow a massive hole, maybe like a kilometer wide hole through a thick ceiling of Las Noches. We see the blast being... I always got the scale wrong as a kid. I always thought things were way smaller, but examining the artwork and the scale, Ichigo's Vasto Lorde Cero is like... Those pillars are massive. Those pillars are like giant skyscrapers. And people say Las Noches is like the size of a country, like maybe a small country, but it's like a big city, like the size of maybe London or whatever. Something like that. It's quite massive. It's dozens of kilometers wide, and so Ichigo's Cero Blast can definitely destroy like a large portion of a city, an entire town, like in the blast range, and then radiating outwards there would be further destruction. But where was I going with this? Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Sorry. So it can destroy like a large town or like a portion of a city, or devastate a city, but not like probably entirely erase it. But when Ichigo is charging up his Cero and his horn gets cut, it like blows out, and it's a pretty big explosion, but it's maybe like the size of a small house, that explosion, and it's not as potent or explosive. It's kind of like a kind of like a fizzle, like a boom, like a pop. So when the technique isn't completed, and although the Lanza appears in his hand, he throws it and it like explodes on contact. But when Vasto Lord Ichigo blocks the Lanza with his hand, he like screeches and is sort of kind of like struggling to keep its form and stuff like that. So I wouldn't say like, oh yeah, Ichigo's hand can survive a blast that would destroy a city, because it's not a complete technique. But could he maybe survive that? Maybe. I think, but we never see him get like directly hit by it, and he does dodge it, so it's not like he's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna be invincible to this. If Ichigo got hit by that, it probably would break him out of his form, because although he's very powerful, he seems to be fairly fragile. Even when he was first using his regular Hollow Mask, it was very fragile, and people keep noting, I didn't think it would be so fragile. Like, it makes you strong, but if I hit you, it kind of just falls apart. And it's the same thing with his Vasto Lorde form. Like, one horn gets cut, and his Cero, like, pops, and then his form falls apart. So, I suppose that's the weakness of Vasto Lorde Ichigo. But he is still pound for pound stronger than Ulquiorra, even though he doesn't. Well, he does have regen. I was going to say he doesn't have regen, but the fight itself points out Ulquiorra's like, oh yes, I can regenerate everything but my internal organs, you know, like the stuff in my abdomen and my brain. And then literally just after that, Ichigo has a hole in his chest, you know, where his organs, his lung, his heart is, and it gets healed up. And he's like, Ulquiorra's like, instant regeneration? Not only that, I, who are rare among the Arrancar, have a notably powerful hollow, like, regeneration power. Yet Ichigo's hollow regeneration power is greater than mine, because he can heal up his organs. So that's pretty crazy. Yeah, it's just insane. Even though his form isn't kept, and maybe he could only heal his organs because the power of his form leaving his body went back into his body. So maybe that's kind of like a one-time thing. Like in his hollow form, he maybe couldn't regenerate, and he can only really regenerate when that form dissipates. That one instance. But anyway, yeah. So Vasto Lorde Ichigo beats Ulquiorra in power, in speed, in durability, and with like an asterisk in regeneration, because he can regenerate his organs. The only thing Ulquiorra is better at, and he seems to show some sort of battle intelligence, like, oh, you're just a stupid brute, you know, throwing a boulder or throwing my arm won't make me hesitate. But he still uses that as a distraction, and he still does stuff like I can't quite remember the instances, but he like slams Ulquiorra's face against the pillar and like drives him up it, as if he remembers that's what Ulquiorra was just doing to like Ichigo like several minutes prior, and he does it back to Ulquiorra. So it kind of shows that even though he doesn't speak, Vasto Lorde Ichigo seems to have some sort of instinct. Definitely he has instinct, but he has some combat intelligence, because he does some things back to Ulquiorra that Ulquiorra has previously done to Ichigo. So, but yet still, I think Ulquiorra has better like perception and not reaction, but like perception and analysis and intelligence, and he's still incredibly strong. So we had a big talk about that, but that's a lot of stuff to talk about with Ichigo versus Ulquiorra. But now we move on to Dangai Ichigo, and I feel like people downplay how strong Dangai Ichigo is because of what happens in the 1,000-Year Blood War arc. I don't know what happens there. I mean, I don't know exactly, and I'm not going to be talking about the 1,000-Year Blood Warfare, but people say, oh yeah, he's, Dangai Ichigo has nothing on the later Ichigo. But I've also heard some people say, hey, Dangai Ichigo is actually, or could actually be the strongest version of Ichigo. I don't know. And we don't get to see too much, because although he does fight with Aizen, he's kind of not really pulling his punches, but he's just kind of letting Aizen talk for a little bit, and then he decides to end things, and then he ends things straight away. Even though it takes Urahara's seal to properly end things, he still just does it, and it's a pretty quick fight, but it's not super duper quick. And the point is, Ichigo's fed up, he has resolve, and he wants to end this quickly, but he still allows some sparring at the beginning to get a feel for Aizen. So Dangai Ichigo, his feats are that he is a transcendent being. So by definition, if Vassal Lord Ichigo isn't a transcendent being, he should be stronger, even though Dangai Ichigo shouldn't have stuff like regen or Sonido. He still should be stronger. And we see Dangai Ichigo grabbing and manhandling Aizen, who is also transcendent being. So his spiritual pressure is so high above anyone else, no one else can feel him. And Ichigo is at plane, even it's implied he's even greater than Aizen, because Aizen can't sense his spiritual pressure and assumes that he's discarded it for physical prowess, which I believed when I first watched Bleach, but that's not the case. That's not even a thing. That's Aizen just making up stuff just to cope. But Ichigo is blowing away mountains with casual sword swings. Yes, Vassal Lord Ichigo could blow away mountains and cities and stuff like that, but can he casually do it? No, he kind of has to use a Sero. We do see him like swing his sword at the beginning, and he like uproots the earth and creates like a wind blast, but it doesn't quite seem the same as Ichigo's. Dangai Ichigo's regular sword swings do seem a bit stronger than Vassal Lord. And so if we basically, what I'm trying to do is, if we could prove that Dangai Ichigo is stronger than Vassal Lord, or even if he's only slightly weaker, then he should be able to beat Ulquiorra. So I think physically Dangai Ichigo is stronger than Vassal Lord, but he also has hollow powers. Vassal Lord has hollow powers like regen and Sonido, which is very, very hard to keep track of. What's special about Sonido, I know like Hirin Kyaku and Flash Step and all these high speed techniques basically feel the same, but just with a different sound effect for a different faction. But the idea behind Sonido and why Arrancar need a pesquisa, a specific gland, like a sensory gland in their anatomy, is that Sonido is more like teleportation, like the body like disintegrates, so the body disappears and then reappears somewhere else. Now I'm sure there can be a delay to that, but you can't. The idea is you can't track a Sonido. You see where they disappear and you see where they turn up, and you can still react to their movements outside of Sonido, but you can't react or track Sonido. Now, obviously, you can have faster ones, or a Pesquisa might be able to track a Sonido because they specifically have a perception gland, and Ulquiorra notes, oh, he slipped past my Pesquisa. Either the Pesquisa can sort of track Sonido, or it can't track Sonido, and it's just a sensory gland. But notably, if it slipped past his Pesquisa, that means it must be Sonido, which I think that's probably the case. So the advantages I see Vassal Lord Ichigo have over Dangai is, firstly, he has Sero, which means he has more destructive capability just in that form. Overall, although he does not have the physicality, but for advantages, he has regeneration, which Dangai Ichigo never needed to show, but also never shows, and he has Sonido, which is harder to track. Although Dangai Ichigo, I think, could be stronger. Being a transcendent being, and obviously Dangai Ichigo has access to Mugetsu, but if we don't talk about Mugetsu, because Mugetsu loses his abilities, and that's kind of like a Like, obviously, Ulquiorra is going to die to Mugetsu. Like, that's not so interesting. So, yeah, Dangai Ichigo is going to win against Ulquiorra. But does he have to use Mugetsu? Let's think about it. Is there any evidence that Vasto Lord Ichigo is a transcendent being? Is there? Being a transcendent being, so it's sort of implied that you need to have two different power sources or two types of power, because Aizen's whole thing was breaking down the wall between Soul Reaper and Arrancar. So imagine, let's like gamify this and say, also this is a really long discussion, so we might only do 3 fights this live stream. But let's gamify this. Let's say the Soul Reapers, they have like different types of stats. Like, they have their speed, they have their Zanjutsu, they have their Hakuda hand-to-hand, they have their Hado abilities and like power and like experimentation, creativity, they have battle intelligence, you know, they have speed, like movement speed with Sonido and Shunpo, and then reaction, not Sonido, Shunpo, sorry, with Shunpo and Flash Step, and then like just like reaction time, as well as stuff like durability, how quick they can recover, as well as abilities like Bankai, Shikai, all of that good stuff. But let's say there's only you can only get so good at like something, right? And let's say you specialize into Hakuda, you get like 100 out of 100 Hakuda. Now you're the best at Hakuda, and you practice Hakuda, so you're always at 100, and you always are the best Hakuda user, and you start to train something else, and then something else, and Zanjutsu, and Shunpo, and eventually you are the most powerful at everything. You know, you're not just like a jack of all trades, or like, you know, but you're a master of everything. You, like Aizen, he felt like he mastered everything there was to do as a Soul Reaper. Yet Genryusai seems to be stronger than Aizen, if you take away his hypnosis, so maybe he was just struggling to fully master everything, but he felt like he was pretty much above everyone else. But if you break down that barrier on that other side, as if there's like a mirror between, there's like a mirror, and one side has Soul Reapers, one side has Hollows. If you manage to break through that mirror, you can then progress a whole other dimension forwards. Like, you can get you can like train with all the hollow powers, like just like regular hollow powers and hollow techniques and sonido, regeneration, all of that sort of stuff. So all of a sudden, instead of only having like the ability to master, let's say, 7 things as a Soul Reaper, 7 main things, and you can only get 700 points of strength if you get 100 in each of these 7 categories. If you break that wall down and get a whole new dimension of skills to learn and a different sort of type of power that fuels it, those hollow abilities, you can now learn so many more techniques, and that's what makes you transcendent. Like, you need to be able to learn multidisciplinary, you know, you need like Soul Reaper or some Quincy, or you need some hollow powers mixed with Soul Reaper powers to become transcendent. That doesn't mean every Arrancar is transcendent, but it means that every Arrancar has the ability to be transcendent, and people like Yamamoto literally can't become transcendent because they're only a Soul Reaper, and they would have to hollowfy themselves or gain some abilities otherwise, you know, power stealing, to be able to become transcendent. But Yamamoto is the strongest Soul Reaper, maybe close to the strongest a Soul Reaper can get, besides like their specific abilities of like Shikai and Bankai, where you could just have a bad one or a good one, or whatever, like a hacks, I suppose you could call it. But Aizen broke through that barrier and became transcendent. Ichigo broke through that barrier and became transcendent. Why? Because he accepted both of his hollow powers and his Soul Reaper powers. when he fought that fusion of Tensa Zangetsu. So he had 2 powers to play off of, and I heard a little birdie, he might have other types of powers. Well, you could at least think, he's a human, he's a Soul Reaper, he's a Hollow, and he might be something else also, and that gave him a leg up to be even more transcendent, one step even above Aizen if Ichigo has 3 or 4 sort of power sources where he can learn those interdisciplinary skill sets and power, while Aizen could only really learn 2, because he didn't say he hollow-fied, but the Hokyoku gave him hollow-like abilities, which allowed him to transcend. So either way, let's just say that Ichigo was at least had 2, maybe 3 sources of power. Now, when you look at Vasulore Ichigo, it seems like Ichigo isn't really there, and it's just his hollow powers. So he can't get any stronger than he can't become transcendent, because even if Vasulore Ichigo is the strongest hollow to ever exist, and I kind of think that he might be, because really, who's stronger? Like Ulquiorra and Stark. Probably Stark before he split his soul was stronger than Vasulore Ichigo, and that's probably about it. So aside from Baragon's like insane senescence ability, Vasulore Ichigo probably in the history of the world was the 2nd strongest hollow ever. But was he transcendent? No. It's impossible for him to be transcendent unless he still is pulling power from his Soul Reaper form. He does use Zangetsu, but he doesn't use any techniques of Zangetsu. He's using Sero and not Getsuga Tensho or anything. But he's still using the blade. And when we are in Ichigo's inner world, we are kind of talking about, we are seeing that white Zangetsu is part of the same body as Old Man Zangetsu, and it just depends which one in internal power struggle, when they're not unified, which one is on top is the form that they take. Like when Old Man Zangetsu is on top, he can pull out White Zangetsu to fight Ichigo, but then White Zangetsu fuses back with Old Man Zangetsu, and he says, hey, at one point I'm gonna be the king. And when Ichigo goes in for his visor training, he sees White Zangetsu, because Old Man Zangetsu is not the primary power right now. White Zangetsu is. So given that, if when White Zangetsu, his new form post like the Ulquiorra fight, is that form with the mask and the horns. So that seems to be what White Zangetsu is. So there is an argument that inherently, because White Zangetsu is taking over Ichigo's body and appears like him, he still has some portion of Old Man Zangetsu inside of him, because they're inseparable in many ways. So even though he's not really using Old Man Zangetsu's technique, like the Getsuga Tensho, he still has some power. And is there any evidence that he is transcendent beyond this idea that Old Man Zangetsu is always part of White Zangetsu? Kind of. If we take the Hell movie as canon, which it doesn't have to be canon, but if we take it as accurate, even if it doesn't technically happen in the universe, could it happen? Could it be canon? Or let's just say it is, because I don't like it when there's additional material and it doesn't seem to directly conflict with anything. I think it's just silly to be like, oh, well, that doesn't count. But, it's one of the 4 major movies, so let's count it. And Vasulore Ichigo does a feat that Yamamoto himself says he thought was impossible, which was break the chains of hell. And he broke the gate of hell too, by accident. He didn't even directly hit it. He hit what we think is the lowest level of hell, and just the rippling, the explosions that caused, went all the way up to the top of hell and broke through the gate of hell. just by coincidence. He wasn't even trying to do that, but it broke the chains of hell, broke the chains that binds the sinners. The only other thing that we've seen doing that is the Kushinata, which is supposed to be pretty much all powerful in hell, or they have dominion over those chains, so they can break them. Even if they're not physically strong enough to break them, they have the authority to break them, because hell is like this moralistic dimension where, you know, you only go there if you've committed certain acts. So the Kushinata have the moral ground to break the chains, while the sinners don't. But Ichigo, in the Vassal Lordy form, didn't have authority to break the chains, but he did through raw power. Yamamoto believes that's impossible, but also Yamamoto probably hasn't tried to do it. So, can Yamamoto break the chains of hell? Oh my goodness, this is a 30-minute talk about Dangai Ichigo versus Ulquiorra, but there's just so much good stuff to talk about here. Maybe this will be a one-off live stream where I just talk about this, because there's so much interesting to talk about here. So, can Yamamoto break the chains of hell? Which has nothing, you think has nothing to do with Dangai Ichigo versus Ulquiorra, but it does, it's relevant. Can he? Maybe. He definitely hasn't tried, but he believes that they're impossible. So he's either been told that, or they're pretty much impossible. Yeah. But there could be the possibility that because Yamamoto is like, you know, is not involved with the stuff Kisuke Urahara and Aizen are doing with like breaking the barrier between, you know, all this and that. And Yamamoto, like when Aizen defeats Yamamoto, before he becomes transcendent, he's cautious and uses Wonder Wise. And I think that's supposed to show, like, when he's like saying, oh yeah, I need to defeat you first and then I'll go to the Soul King. I don't know how powerful Squad Zero are. I assume they're around Yamamoto's strength. Like, you know, Yamamoto's so much stronger than anyone else. So I assume Squad Zero are slightly weaker than Yamamoto or around Yamamoto's strength. But Yamamoto is supposed to be like the apex Soul Reaper. And when Aizen defeats him, that's the idea of like, I've defeated the Soul Society, you're the head of the Gote, once I defeat you, the Gote are finished, and then I've like surpassed Soul Reapers. Even though he's not transcendent yet and he has to use Wonder Wise, he still pretty much does it, defeats Yamamoto, even though he doesn't manage to kill him. So I have this belief that Yamamoto is supposed to be the apex of what a Soul Reaper can be without becoming transcendent, or pretty much. I think that means that if he believes the chains of hell can't be broken, he's probably right that he can't break them. And you probably need to be a transcendent being to break the chains of hell. The chains of hell being sort of this, kind of a bit like the, you know what? Yeah, I think the chains of hell, here's my theory. I think the chains of hell are a thing of logic. Sort of like a being of logic and not of spiritual or like spiritual energy. Because they seem to have this, it's supposed to be indestructible, right? It's supposed to be indestructible, and not like in Naruto where something's indestructible and you just have to like use a special jutsu. This is like, it's indestructible unless you ascend to another plane of being, right? Unless you transcend. It's indestructible. The only thing that can break it is the Kushinata, because they have the authority over it. And so that's more of like a logical thing. Like, it's not a physical thing that can't be broken. It's like, you need to have authority. You need to have a certain thing to do it. Or, like, logically, like, they can't be broken unless this. Like, unless somebody with authority breaks them. And the cleaner of the Dangai seems to be a similar thing, where Gin mentions, Aizen, you can't destroy the cleaner. It doesn't matter how strong you are. It's not a being of spiritual energy. It's a being of logic. It's comprised of logic. It has a logical thing, and logically, you can't destroy it. Just like with the chains of hell, you can't destroy it, they're unbreakable. Yet Aizen does it anyway. Does anybody talk about this, how he killed a being of logic? No, I don't think people talk about this much, but he does, because he's transcendent, and so the logic of the universe doesn't fully, like, the logic that other people can understand, like, Soul Reapers are on a certain plane. They're not transcendent, regular Soul Reapers. And so the cleaner to them is a being of logic because it can't be destroyed. It just can't be destroyed by raw power. But if you are transcendent, maybe it isn't a being of logic anymore. It's a being comprised of that plane that you've ascended to, or you have ascended to a plane of logic where you can erase things that don't seem possible to those who are on the plane below. We have this whole like anagram of like 2D to 3D, like 2D creatures can't interact with 3D, 4D, 5D, whatever, right? So my theory is Aizen destroying the cleaner is very similar to Vasto Lorde Ichigo destroying the chains of hell. Yamamoto is the person who we're trusting when he says that the chains of hell can't be broken, or I didn't think the chains of hell could be broken. And, he's very well experienced and knowledgeable about the world. Gin is much younger, but he's very intelligent. And he says, you can't destroy the cleaner, it's a being of logic. Yet, he destroys it anyway. So I think that Vasto Lorde Ichigo is transcendent because he breaks the chains of hell, and the fact that inherently, even though Ichigo isn't really there and White Zangetsu is taking control of his body, inherently he still has some of Old Man Zangetsu or Tensa Zangetsu's power. It would be Tensa Zangetsu's power. Tensa Zangetsu's power in him. Even though that's not the primary power, he still has some. So he's probably a low transcendent being, or on the very cusp. But I do believe he's transcendent, which means that Dangai Ichigo isn't necessarily stronger than him because he's a transcendent being. Although I do still believe that Dangai Ichigo is stronger, because although he doesn't seem to be using his hollow powers, it's kind of an inverse, where Vasto Lorde Ichigo is not really using his Soul Reaper powers and mostly using his hollow powers. And Dangai Ichigo is both conscious, so should be, susceptible to emotions, but also should have resolve and a greater intelligence in a battle. Even though it's not all instinct, he should be able to fight more intelligently. He's using primarily Soul Reaper powers, but obviously inherently Ichigo still has hollow powers, even though he's suppressing them, because when he uses his mask, it doesn't have the horns. It does have the black lines, but he's struggling to wield it, and he's not fully calling it forwards, because if he fully called his mask forwards, it would have the horns and stuff on it, like White Zangetsu does, because White Zangetsu can use the mask and stuff like that, or is the mask or whatever. So clearly Dangai Ichigo is using his Soul Reaper powers primarily, and he's using pretty much, we can't really notice him using his hollow powers, but they're still present within him and powerful, even if he's holding some of it back, which I think is why some people might say Thousand Year Blood Warfare Ichigo's stronger, because I hear he doesn't use his hollow powers, but I think he accepts them or something like that. Anyway, so yeah, they're kind of two sides of the same coin. Dangai being Soul Reaper, but inherently there's still hollow power, and then Vasto Lorde Ichigo being hollow power, but inherently still having Soul Reaper powers within him. Although Ichigo being present or like conscious, maybe that means he's also human, but does human count as one of the things? Like, was Ichigo transcendent because, or has the potential to be transcendent even if he didn't have hollow powers and he was just a human Soul Reaper? I don't think so, because humans don't really have anything powering them, so I think he needed something more. But he seems to have something more because he was a plane above Aizen. So, but Aizen only recognizes that when he goes Mugetsu. but I think that's only because he expects Mugetsu to give him a power boost, and if Mugetsu's power boost seems to be so strong, yet it doesn't bring him up to that level, he realizes maybe Ichigo has been above me this whole time because I've not been able to feel him out. So, thus, Dangai Ichigo is a plane above Vaster Lorde Ichigo, and even if they were on the same plane of existence, I think Dangai Ichigo would probably be slightly stronger than Vaster Lorde Ichigo, because Ichigo is there and he's fully using his Soul Reaper powers, especially when he goes Mugetsu. But ignoring Mugetsu, he's using his Soul Reaper powers and his physicality, and has that hollow power within him. And Vaster Lorde has all the hollow stuff but doesn't have Ichigo's conscious mind, so I think Dangai Ichigo could just fight better. Now with the stuff like Sonido and not having a Pesquisas or whatever, yeah, maybe he could struggle against Vaster Lorde Ichigo, and Vaster Lorde Ichigo can regenerate, but ultimately Vaster Lorde Ichigo is very fragile, and even Ulquiorra, when he's like pretty much dead and his organs are gone and he's just like, his body's barely keeping him up, he still manages to jump up and cut Ichigo's horn, and that breaks him out of the thing. Even though Ulquiorra loses, he still manages to when distracted, just like sneak up and break him out of that form. So Dangai Ichigo would probably break, like, they'd be of similar power, maybe both transcendent, but I think Vaster Lorde Ichigo is just barely transcendent, maybe, and Dangai Ichigo is definitely transcendent, or maybe even twice over transcendent. So I think Dangai Ichigo should be able to take Vaster Lorde. There is a chance that he might be overwhelmed, and obviously Dangai can't have high-speed regeneration or anything, but obviously if he used Mugetsu, that would be it. Like, Vaster Lorde Ichigo is so fragile, so using Mugetsu, which seems like it probably can't miss, but you know, you can't really get out of range of it. It's basically just like a Vyum. I mean, probably you could miss, but I don't think Dangai Ichigo would miss, you know what I'm saying? Anyway, yeah, so that is why I think I talked for about 45 minutes about this. Dangai Ichigo versus Ulquiorra. Dangai Ichigo wins. But we learn a lot of things along the way. Theory about the chains of hell being a thing of logic, like the cleaner in the Dangai. Talking about Yamamoto, talking about Aizen, talking about how breaking the barrier between different power sets works, and how I think Vaster Lorde Ichigo is also a transcendent being. So that, I said I was going to try and do a short one, but this is by far my longest. I think my longest before was like 20-25 minutes. This has been 45 minutes. So that was that fight, I guess. Should I just leave it at this? I think I should just leave it at this and have this live stream just be Dangai Ichigo versus Ulquiorra. Because, yeah. Obviously, the next one could be shorter, but I think I only really have time to do one more fight. Maybe like a 15-minute, 10-minute discussion. But what's the point in having a live stream where we just do 2 fights, a massive one and a small one? I think let's just keep it with this. So this video can just be Dangai Ichigo versus Ulquiorra. So there you go. Ulquiorra loses. And I don't think Dangai Ichigo needs to use Mugetsu. I don't think that at all. I think he would just win. Yeah. There we go. Thanks for joining me. God loves you. And I was surprised about how much I had to say about that. But yeah. Ichigo vs Ulquiorra is pretty much my favorite fight. So I had a lot of things. And there's a lot of argument with how strong is Ulquiorra and how strong is Dangai Ichigo and how strong is Vaster Lorde. So there was plenty to talk about here. This was a very fruitful matchup. Anyway, I'm ending it now. Have a wonderful day and Happy New Year.